In Great Britain, the cover-up of a blood bank scandal was uncovered, the consequences of which are still causing people to die today, and the government wants to take action. I didn't have the chance to talk about this, so I will do that today. The scandal involving contaminated blood banks in Britain's hospitals, which is considered the biggest health disaster in the 80-year history of the British health system NHS, has apparently been covered up for decades. An investigation report published, I guess 2 weeks ago, concludes that government officials repeatedly destroyed documents over the years and that patients were knowingly exposed to unacceptable infection risks. A day later, the British government announced the first comprehensive compensation payments by the end of the year. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has already officially apologized to those affected. In the biggest treatment scandal in the British Health Service NHS, up to 30,000 people received contaminated blood products in the 70s and 80s. More than 3,000 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C from blood transfusions or treatments. The more than 2,500-page report of the Infected Blood Inquiry accused the health service, politicians and authorities of a catalogue of failures. The head of the inquiry, Brian Langstaff, told journalists that the disaster was no accident. People trusted doctors and the government to keep them safe, and that trust was abused, he said. Various governments in recent decades have claimed that patients were treated as best as possible and that blood tests were introduced at the earliest possible opportunity. However, new evidence shows that documents from the Ministry of Health were marked for destruction. And according to Langstaff, the consequences are still present today. Patients who in the past suffered life-destroying infections from blood transfusions continue to die every week, and more deaths are expected in the coming years. In addition, the consequences are catastrophic not only for the infected people, but also for their relatives. The cover-up of the scandal came to light just a few weeks after research into a drug caused a stir in Great Britain. The drug is responsible for thousands of deaths in Great Britain. In Germany too, it's one of the most commonly prescribed active ingredients. Great Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak officially apologized to those affected, as I said. He said, "I'm really sorry," and he said that in front of Parliament in London. The results of the report on the scandal are a disgrace for the British state. Time and again, people in positions of power and trust have had the opportunity to stop the transmission of these infections, and they failed, he said. Cabinet member John Glenn also announced in Parliament on that day that many victims will receive provisional compensation payments of £210,000 over the next 3 months. The Conservative politician did not give a total amount, though. According to media reports, the government has earmarked at least £10 billion for this. Relatives of the victims have criticized the payments for coming too late. The disaster, as I said, was no accident, said the head of the Commission of the Inquiry, Brian Langstaff, to journalists, and people really trusted in doctors and governments to keep them safe. And what did we see now? The more than 2,500-page report of the Infected Blood Inquiry denounces this whole catalogue of failures, as I said, and the consequences were catastrophic. And seriously, the disaster continues because patients who have suffered life-destroying infections still die. We must not forget this, and even if I repeat myself. And claims by various governments that patients received the best medical treatment at the time and that they would be protected at all stages are just one thing, and that's untrue, according to Langstaff. The truth had been concealed for decades, and there was evidence that documents from the Ministry of Health had been marked for destruction. We don't even know how many have indeed been destroyed. But the Tories are indeed in more trouble than talking about something that happened in the past, because Britain is voting in early July and the Tories are in crisis and the Labour Party has a good chance. But the leftists are disappointed still. It's easy to find reasons in Britain why the Conservatives should be voted out on July 4th. And it sounds something like this. Everyone knows that our country is no longer functioning, our economy is in chaos, we do not control our borders, crime is out of control, our health system is collapsing, our armed forces are inadequately equipped, our elderly are rotting in poor care facilities, and meanwhile our schools are falling apart, our roads are full of holes, our public transport is unreliable, our water is dirty, our energy is expensive, and we are missing a few million homes. That's what you hear people say. And that was not a Labour leaflet. It is the latest column by the right-wing commentator Julia Hartley-Brewer in the tabloid Sun, which likes to claim that it is decisive in elections. The Sun was staunchly conservative for a long time. But what now? The frustration of the British after 14 years of Tory government is so deep that the leader of the opposition Labour Party, Keir Starmer, apparently doesn't have to do anything to win by a landslide. Starmer also made the Sun accusation that nothing works anymore in his first campaign video last week, directly after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of the Tories stood in the rain at the start of his election campaign. The Labour team could hardly believe their luck, is how left-wing columnist Polly Toynbee describes the memorable moment in The Guardian when, as Conservative columnist Fraser Nelson reconstructs in the Daily Telegraph, the minister gathered in 10 Downing Street turned pale as Sunak's suit steadily soaked up the rain outside, and his words were almost completely drowned out by the Labour campaign music around the corner. So is the British election campaign already over? Well, it's not that simple. Keir Starmer succeeded Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader in 2020, who had lost the 2019 election to Boris Johnson. Starmer drove the left wing out of the party, and Corbyn is now running as an independent in his London constituency. And many left-wing activists have ended up with the Greens or the pro-Palestinian Workers' Party. The more certain a Labour election victory seems, the less dangerous it seems for left-wing voters to cast a protest vote now against Keir Starmer. Just as on the right, many Conservatives are switching to the right-wing populists of Reform UK in the face of the Tory downfall, as Julia Hartley-Brewer suggests in The Sun. Neither Sunak nor Starmer are really popular. Starmer was for Corbyn and Sunak was for Johnson before both sent their predecessors into the desert. And left-wingers' stomachs turn when Starmer accuses the Prime Minister of letting too many refugees into the country or calls Labour the true party of patriotism. Starmer is now promising economic growth and public investment, just like Sunak. In mid-May, Starmer unveiled 6 commitments as first steps after taking office: controlling spending, establishing a carbon-free state energy company, 40,000 additional doctor's appointments per week, a border protection unit against boat refugees, more neighborhood police, and 6,500 additional teachers. This differs only in nuances from the Tory program or manifesto. And on Friday, Starmer was reminded in an interview of everything he had previously promised and then thrown overboard. Abolishing tuition fees, nationalising privatised services, higher taxes for the rich, £28 billion in climate investments per year. Yeah, what's up about that? In response, Starmer waffled and explained that you just have to choose between ending tuition fees and shorter waiting times at the doctor. And he seemed defensive and thin-skinned then. In it, Starmer is reminiscent of the former Tory Prime Minister Theresa May, who also started the 2017 election campaign with a 20% lead and then almost lost. Her luck was Labour's crisis under Corbyn. Starmer's luck now is the desolate state of the Tories under Sunak, and that should be enough for an election victory. But is it also enough for governing? We will see. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.